So let me tell you a little bit about the impetus for this. I have a new book coming out. It's called The Truth is in the Triangle. And most of you have heard me, if you've had sessions with me, talk about this for many years, but I finally put it in book form and it'll be out in a few weeks. And I'm seeing a lot in my practice, and usually when I'm working on something in my own life, the practice sort of follows suit and dictates, and then the book sort of follows. So it's just something that's coming up a lot in my sphere of consciousness, are these relationship issues. And so I've been getting a lot of guidance around subconscious programming, specifically emotions, subconscious energies, the subconscious templates that are stored from the moment of conception. So I'm going to give you some of the key points today, and then a call to action at the end of the call. So today is how to get into a healthy relationship without therapy, fighting, giving up your freedom, moving out, getting divorced, or becoming a different person. And I specifically make these points because I've had to deal with these, and most of my clients have had to deal with these, and a lot of the survey comments have dealt with these. So you don't have to change who you are. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. It's a mismatch of information from the conscious and subconscious minds that show up in the relationship. So what I want to cover today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, some misconceptions about love and relationships. I'm going to share with you a universal law that dictates all relationships. I'll talk about love being a math problem, some subconscious programs. I'll give you some secrets, a couple of case studies, and then a call to action. And we'll have time for questions as well. So today is about getting into a healthy relationship or working through one that you're already in, so that you can be whole with yourself and with your partner. So some of you don't know me, maybe professionally, or don't know my background, but my Ph.D. is actually in mental health and marriage and family. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I work with individuals, couples, and families. I am divorced twice. I've had various unsuccessful relationships. And like most people, I thought it was me. And it wasn't. It was a lack of understanding what I was programmed to do in a relationship to fail. And that's basically the program we're given at the moment of conception from our parents. So I've written several books. I have several books coming out this year, probably a total of 7 or 8 at this point. But the one that this is related to is my book called The Truth is in the Triangle, where I go into the subconscious programming, what I call the psychological orgasm. We'll talk about that, and the balance of the elements. So some misconceptions, and we'll go into those in a minute, is that you have to go to therapy. You have to fight to sort of set your boundaries. You have to fight to sort of fight for free time or freedom or independence. Not true. None of these things are true. If you're in a relationship, you don't need to be alone and move out or get separated or divorced to figure it out. And you don't need to become a different person than who you are. And a lot of people think, well, I can't get into a relationship until I'm whole in myself and I'm single, so I'm going to wait to fix my issue and then find love. So these are all things that are not true at all. So therapy is not the only way. Therapy, working on yourself and being alone, is not the only way. Fighting in relationship or fixing and spending a lot of time fixing problems that we think are problems in relationship is not the only way. So I myself went to therapy in both of my marriages, am a therapist, have studied all the therapeutic models, and none of them speak to the core program issue. And it's literally a subconscious programming that we get, one of 12. We're all sort of within 12. And I'm going to give you some examples in a bit. And when I learned these things and I started putting them into practice, I have a beautiful, loving, healthy relationship with my partner now, and I'm the exact same person that I was. Nothing changed. I'm still Frances, but I don't need to honor that subconscious programming and that emotional programming in order to have a healthy relationship. So everybody has a story. I'm going to just share briefly mine. These stories usually happen in our infancy, and you may not know the impact that it has. It could be your mom talking bad about your dad, or never get married, men suck, whatever they said. My mom told me that when I got married, she was going to leave the front door open unlocked, because the guy that married me was going to realize that I was a whack and basically throw me back. And to avoid me getting hurt, she would leave the door unlocked so I could just walk right in. So that's the story. The subconscious program was already there, but now I had a story to attach to that programming. And so you think it's you. You think it's something that you learned in childhood. You think it's something that a partner said to you. You're insensitive. You're, a beast. You're, not good in bed. And it has nothing to do with that. The thing is that the story in the earthly consciousness, the story in the earthly world will follow suit to your program for you to prove that story true. But this started way before you ever had the story. And so when I started understanding this, the story informed what I was having the psychological orgasm and this programming, then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can deconstruct this and really just be me without having to honor the story. So if you remember a story or know a story or observed a story between your parents or relationships, just know that that is stored in your subconscious, but the program was there before. So like everything I do, I bring it to universal law. And there are 8 universal laws that dictate absolutely everything. The key law, the Mac Daddy of laws, is the law of mentalism, or the principle of mentalism, that says all is mind. Everything's in our mind. Everything in the world is created from our thoughts. That's a really big law. And it's really hard for people sometimes to understand that law. So I say that the law of gender is sort of like the gift for the universe, for the earthlings that we are. So it's still all is mind, everything is created in our mind, but it's like one step further. So think of all is mind as the 7th chakra, like all of it, the transcendence, and think of the universal law of gender as the 6th chakra, where our mind is, and we can think it through logically. The law of gender states that everything has masculine and feminine energies. That is it. This has nothing to do with sex. This has nothing to do with gender in terms of male, female. It has to do with energies. And we see this repeatedly in mythology. Shiva, Shakti, Dionysus. We see this throughout. We see it in the yin yang with the white dot and the black, petal, things like that. You are a component of the 4 elements, the 2 masculine and the 2 feminine. And your balance, if you don't know your balance, you will overcompensate. You will try to change that balance. That balance is given to you at the moment of conception and to birth. It's perfect. In the Vedas, it's called the Manas Prakriti, and it is perfect. It is your perfect state, your perfect mental state. But you don't know that. You're conditioned and told that you're wrong, you're broken, and you're too much, and the door is going to be left unlocked. And so you go out in your relationships, another person who has their balance of energies, and now it starts to clash because no one's living their true balance of energies. Without knowing your energetic balance, without knowing your elemental sort of equation, you're going to see arguments and conflict and problems arise in your relationship. So one of the key things I saw in the survey was sexual problems. And I see a lot of sexual problems in my practice. The bedroom is the best way to know the imbalance of those energies. I know what's happening in your bed, the earthly element, the lowest plane of the universe. I know what's happening in your mind, the highest plane of the universe. They're related. Nothing that is happening is wrong. It's just a mismatch because you don't know who you're supposed to be. You're not with the wrong person. You're not broken. You're not too much or too little or not enough. You're just right. But we've been given a math problem. So love is a math problem. And it's not only limited to love. This could be done at work. This could be done in your family, but mainly in our relationships, we see this. So knowledge of your elemental balance explains why you attract who you attract, but without the knowledge, you call it a problem. And then you think that you're wrong or broken or don't have boundaries or don't love yourself enough. Not true. So that's the first issue. The second issue, we are all programmed in the subconscious to fail at relationships because our parents who created us were also in failed relationships. No matter how successful they appeared, they were not. They were also out of balance. And there's only one illness, disease, imbalance. All other illnesses, call it what you are, come from this. And it's based on the elemental structure. So in your subconscious programming, you learned what I call a psychological orgasm. And it is an attachment to an emotion. Your elemental balance will dictate your preferred emotion. Mine, and there's different ones for each of the elements, mine was water, hopelessness. As long as I was in hopelessness, failing at relationships, I was having an orgasm in my head. That's it. We're not broken, we're not wrong, we're not unlovable. It's programming. There are 12 archetypes for these programs, and they can boil down to 4 elements. So let me give you a few examples. So one could be anger. And the archetype is conflict and harmony, and this is oftentimes linked to fire. And in my 2 client cases, I'll explain. Deceit. You can show up in your relationships as betrayal or honesty issues, and that could be an issue with the air element. Dependence. It can show up in your relationship as power struggles or equality or lack of equality, and it's linked to the water element. And some issues around control, where you feel restricted or you want more freedom, is linked to the earth element. So there's 12 in terms of the archetypes, the subconscious programming, and each individual person has one psychological orgasm, the elemental structure, and it's tied to the emotion. Understanding this understands why you are the way you are, why you're creating the issue in the relationship to stay in that psychological orgasm, which is indeed, whether you remember the story or not, a story programmed in your subconscious between the ages of 0 to 7, like my mom saying, I'm going to leave the door unlocked. Everybody has this. Any questions so far? Okay. So, some secrets. I've touched on these a bit. You don't need therapy. In therapy, you're going to be taught that you have to speak in I language and that you have to hear the other person and then you have to validate their feelings. No, not accurate. These are therapeutic models, and I am a Ph.D. in marriage and family counseling. And those skills work, but they do not shift the core issue in your relationship. You will continue living this out. Those techniques only last for a certain amount of time. And if you've ever been in counseling, you stop counseling and you go right back into your pattern. You've ever gone on a diet, you get off the diet, you go right back into your pattern because you have not shifted and understood the core archetypes, the core emotions, the core elemental balance to why you're creating that in the first place. You do not need to be alone to figure yourself out. That is absolutely not true. And in Secret 3, I'll share something. You do not need to change who you are. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. All you need to know is who you are, your elements and your preferred emotion that keeps you in your psychological orgasm and your subconscious programming, because that's a limitation that you think you deserve. I call that the plexiglass paradox. A plexiglass is a see-through, kind of like a glass ceiling. You are programmed to have only a certain amount of happiness in love. Every time you hit that plexiglass ceiling, your whole relationship goes back into the vicious cycle of fighting and yelling and, whatever it is that you do. The plexiglass metaphors, because there's something beyond, but you do not have a program, a permissible program to go beyond that upper limit of happiness in your love relationships. But understanding your preferred emotion and your elemental structure, you can achieve that. Secret 2, this doesn't take time. This is something you do in your day in and day out thought process, because it's all in your mind. So you don't have to do anything extra. It's not like you have to sit down and do something and take up time from your busy life in terms of, I have kids. I don't need to leave and move out of my house to give space to the other person or to myself to figure myself out. It's actually a real world experience. If you are single, you can obviously do that with yourself. And, when you're in relationship, do the skills. Even if you've tried absolutely everything, you can still get into a healthy relationship. And even if your schedule is super busy, because most of us are very busy, especially the years that I see that most people have problems is those years when there's working and there's cooking and there's children and there's school, and now with COVID and everyone's home, and it's like, how am I possibly going to work on my relationship, not kill my spouse? And we're all, sort of stuck at home together. This is not a problem. That's the beauty of understanding your orgasm, your elements, and your emotion. And Secret 3, and those of you who know me that I live, breathe, and eat, spirituality. This is the fastest way to enlightenment. This is the fastest way to healing wounds, to self-love. If that's what you want beyond just a healthy relationship, if you want to go beyond just having a really great sex life and feeling really good with your partner, and now you really care about self-love and spiritual growth, the best way is with a partner and using the tools and learning these programs. Because this leads you to what's called the Heros Gamos. This is the mystical marriage. The mystical marriage is actually where the Christians got the sacrament of marriage. It's the sign of Libra that's supposed to be balanced, and Libra is the sign of marriage. It has nothing to do with marriage with a male or female or two males or two females. It has to do with the law of gender, balancing your math problem, your equation, not having all air, earth, fire, and water across the board the same. No, that's nonsense. No one's bored. Plus, you'd be so boring if that were the case. You wouldn't stand yourself. It's the mystical marriage of self to self. Your light parts, your dark parts, seeing your shadow, understanding your subconscious, and learning to love yourself the way you are. This is an ancient ceremony in my book Witch Bitch, if you have it. It's a Heros Gamos ceremony. I've married several people using this ceremony. It's an ancient ceremony where it was usually a woman would marry the godhead of her choice. And I do these ceremonies for people that are seeking partners or people that actually want to get married. I marry people, and we do the Heros Gamos to encourage to work through in the partnership the elemental balance, the psychological orgasm, and your preferred emotion. So if you want to just get beyond, like I said, a healthy sex life, great communication, and just peace in your home, and you want to take this a step further, you actually can. So I just want to share 2 client cases. John is a client who is constantly fighting in his marriage. And what he discovered was his archetype of anger. That was his preferred emotion. That was his psychological orgasm. So you will prove that story if you know the story to be true. Or more importantly, you will prove that subconscious programming archetype to be true. And you will repeat that and repeat it and repeat it, because for you, that's home. That's mom and dad loving you. So he is now happily dating his long-term girlfriend. And what he discovered in his element is that he didn't have a lot of fire. So he kept overcompensating for the lack of fire, which showed up as anger. So the element and the emotion and the psychological orgasm and the story that you live out from childhood, they all play out to make this perfect soup, to confirm to you that you're wrong, broken, not enough, too much, too little. And of course, it shows up, like I said, in the bedroom. Jennifer is a client of mine. I speak about her at length in the book, whose husband betrayed her. And the archetype was deceit and self-betrayal. That's an air element issue. And they are now back together. They did separate for a while, but they got back together when they were working with me. She came separately and then they came together. And one of the things that she discovered was too much air in her chart or in her elemental structure. It's not only astrology, it's just your horoscopos, your what I call your spiritual scoreboard. And so that air attracts archetypes and self-deceit or betrayal. So the elemental mismatch or the elemental imbalance will bring forth the situation to live it out, so that you can confirm that preferred emotion, so that you can confirm that story if you have one from childhood, so that you can confirm that subconscious programming, and that you can confirm that plexiglass upper limit ceiling for your happiness and love. Because you do not have permission to do it better than your parents. And this does not matter if you ever knew your parents, if your parents abandoned you, if you're adopted, if they're together for 30 years, quote unquote, happy, it does not matter. The programming is from the conception. So what I do in this particular model is I help people get into healthy relationships or work through their current ones. And what we do is we identify the subconscious program, specifically the elements, the emotions, which is the psychological orgasm and the archetypes. If there is a story, great, we deconstruct the story and use it for the parts. And identify that these things are inherited. They are inherited at conception. We are all doomed to fail in relationship or have a limitation in terms of how happy we can be in love. So your parents, for instance, could have been 30 years together and you two are in a 25 or 30-year relationship. That doesn't mean that Jennifer was happy. She's, been with her husband for 25 years. There's obviously been issues. So it addresses these things right off the bat. And since everything is subconscious, you cannot heal things created at the subconscious consciously. It's impossible. So when Einstein says, if you try to solve a problem at the same level of consciousness at which is created, that's insanity. You're doing the same things. Boundaries and date nights and therapy and communication and moving out, and nothing happens. Because it's the same program that you're reliving over and over. So until you get very clear on the subconscious archetypes, the subconscious programming, what's fueling all of that, you don't quote unquote heal the issue. You don't really shift the system so that everybody can be in a horoscopos in their partnership and then ultimately, hopefully, with themselves. So if you had a choice between trying to do this by yourself without any guidance, and I would obviously give guidance, I've got videos and workbooks and such forth, or do it with someone who's already done this work what would you choose? Would you choose to do it alone, or would you choose to have help and guidance? And you can type your little number into the chat box or raise your hand or say something. So if you want to know more, there's my link to Calendly, and we can talk further about what I offer in terms of reprogramming and how to identify your patterns, your emotions, and your psychological orgasm. So I just want to mention a few things that came up repeatedly in the surveys, and I think I addressed most of them, but I wrote them down. Sex. Sex is directly related to the element balance or imbalance. That's all that that is. So there's a big phenomenon happening right now in my practice, specifically with men, either low testosterone or lack of desire. It's a shift in this law of gender elements. And I've written extensively on that from a spiritual standpoint, from an energetic standpoint, from this universal law. So sex directly related, if that's the only story that we were to use, I would immediately show you what the elemental issues are there. Boundaries. A bunch of you said that there's difficulty with boundaries. When you start identifying your program and your psychological orgasm and your imbalance of elements, or that you think it's out of balance, the boundaries resolve themselves. Therapy, I mentioned, you don't need years or months of therapy when you have these tools that you do organically in your life. It doesn't take extra time, so to speak. And some people mentioned body image. They linked body image to sex in terms of not loving their body or not feeling good about their body. Body image issues are directly related to earth element. So again, it goes back to the elemental structure. Any questions about what I shared?
Francis?
Yes.
There is, in your client case studies, you talk about insufficient and excess. How do you gauge what is an insufficient or excess elemental profile?
Depending on what's showing up, let's say deceit is air. So depending on what is the client is experiencing, you can identify that that's an air issue, just like anger is a fire issue. In this case, John had insufficient fire. So what we do is we overcompensate for those energies, and it could be conflict. So if that's your archetype and your emotion is anger, and you have an imbalance of, let's say, the fire element, then you don't know any other format. You don't know any other programming. Your program, let's say, with anger because you saw conflict in your home, for instance, then that's how you're resolving the problem. The universe does not like empty spaces. When I had breast cancer the first time, I love the synchronicity. I was so dissociated from my body that I knew things about the body, but I had kind of checked out and just wanted to hang out in the spirit realm. And I go to the oncologist and she's like, oh, we're going to take out your tumor. And the body doesn't like empty spaces. So water is going to fill in where the tumor was removed. And I was like, oh, spirit world, same thing. Everything that happens in the law of mentalism, the ether, trickles down into air, into fire, into water, into earth. So those elemental structures create everything. And so we don't like empty spaces. That's where I use the word insufficient. So fire is what's out of balance, where we're gonna have to replace some fire with what's missing. And we don't have healthy choices because we don't have programs, because our plexiglass says, fight like mom and dad, an example. Not everybody has anger. Same thing with air. You have excess air. Maybe your parents were intellectuals. They were very curious. They were always, watching the news and talking about politics and current events at the dinner table. There's this whole excess of air. You need to bring that into your relationship. So you call that excess air. Some other element suffers as a result, or you bring in the negative or the psychological orgasm. Air is linked to deceit and betrayal. So it's personal for the person, but that's how that plays out. And so it's just miseducation on exactly who you are and why you're choosing these sort of behaviors, because you think that you have to follow a program that you were destined to follow and you don't. Did that help?
Yeah, I was also just curious to see if it had anything to do with how many, say, air signs you have in your astrology chart, or it seems to be a little bit more than just that.
Yeah, you can definitely go to your astrology and count up your planets and get sort of your elemental breakdown, but no, it's more than that. It's more like a system. Subconscious programming, if there's a story, what the preferred emotion that sort of keeps you trapped, that then makes you unavailable to your partner because you're too in that element. Let's say water, like I said, with me, hopelessness. If I'm so wrapped up in my excess water hopelessness, then what do I have available to give? And then let's say how it shows up in the earthly realm in your relationship, AKA your bedroom. So yeah, it's more of a system, but that's a beginning. The chart is a beginning, but it's a little bit more. Any other questions? Maria, you have a question? I see you thinking. I see your air element very active right now.
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I have the questions. I'm just trying to, you know, like formulate it, because this, all of it piques my interest, and I think I understand some of the concepts, but I know that I need to understand more. You know, and I'm trying to think of like, okay, what's my programming? What came with the subconscious? You know, and then why is the failed marriage, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Well, if you think of questions, you can always shoot me an email. If you want to set up a call, I'll put up most of you just text me, and that's fine. I did open this up to new people. So let me see what I put. So I did create a Calendly, which is like a calendar, but if you have my email or phone number, you can obviously just text me, and that's how I respond to most of you guys anyway. So I'm trying this out. And if you have questions and you think of something after, do not hesitate. Truth is in the Triangle's coming out in a few weeks. It's at the publishers. There's a workbook on my website. There are videos on my YouTube channel. Why We Get Married, part 1 and 2 are the two that are speak to some of this. So that's a good place to start if you want to start dabbling in this work. And if you want to go deeper and further, just let me know, and I am available to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.